Shall I kick it off, Dave? Yeah, let's get going. So welcome everyone. I'm State Representative Steve Handy from Davis County, and this is a terrific working group that we put together. We made a report recently. I made a report recently at our board meeting, which was a couple weeks ago, about how excited I have been about your engagement in this working group, the Education, Research, and Innovation Working Group. And so with that, let's have Commissioner Wolstenhume extend a greeting, and then we'll turn the time over to our Executive Director to take us through the agenda this afternoon.
Thanks, Representative Handy. I'll just say welcome. Michael, welcome to the group. I know you'll add a lot to the conversation, so appreciate you taking time to be with us. And you can always take that tie off, Michael. We'll allow that. So you probably have to put it on for your next meeting, though, so it might not be worth it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
With that, Alan, I think we'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you both very much. And again, thanks to all of you for participating. If the meetings with the other groups are any indication, we should be able to finish by 3. I know several of you indicated that you have to drop off by then. So the real agenda today is give you a little update on what's happened in the last month or so. Then the bulk of it is for us to spend some time going through the draft report we've put together, summarizing your work and getting your final input on it before we get ready to turn it over to our planning team actually tomorrow. So it's a tight time frame. And then just give you a quick word on where we go from here. So with that in mind, I think we mentioned to you that we're in the process of hiring a planning team to do a master plan, a framework master plan for our development by next summer. And we put out an RFQ asking for firms to apply. There were 12 that did, really top-notch firms. I think anybody in the planning world would recognize most, if not all of them. And then we had the real tough task of trying to narrow that field down. And so we went through all of the proposals, identified 6 that we thought were kind of rose to the top. Last week, we conducted interviews with each of the 6 firms and narrowed that list down to 3 finalists. So tomorrow we're going to issue another document that summarizes stage 2 of the process. And essentially that will involve pretty rigorous competition among those 3 in 3 different charrettes. So the first week of November, we'll engage with them virtually, share lots of background information, everything from site data to what's going on in the region, the politics, the history of this site, and answer any questions they have. They'll then have 2 or 3 weeks to go back, digest the information, and start developing a vision for this site. It's going to be kind of high level, but big ideas and concepts. We'll meet with them again toward the end of November. Actually, I think the first day or 2 of December. Listen to what they've come up with, engage in the dialogue. What do we like? What don't we like? And then on December 11th, they'll come back having refined their visions and their proposals and make final presentations. The selection committee will then make a recommendation to the board of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, and the board will make the final decision in the middle of middle of December. We hope to then negotiate a contract by the end of the year and get this team started first thing next year. So one of the things that we provided to them, and I think I mentioned this, was a set of key vision elements. These are big concepts that have come out of our working groups. And certainly this idea of innovation, an innovation campus, a place where there's this culture of idea generation and commercializing ideas was one of those key vision elements. And we scored our applicants on that, along with their proposed process, and their experience and background. So it was very significant in the scoring process. We'll continue to involve all of you, and I'll describe that a little bit more later. But I think in the interest of time, let's see if we can jump to the heart of today's discussion. And I'm going to pull up here a copy of the report that we had submitted to you. I think shared that with you last week so that you could take a look at it. The purpose of this report is to capture everything that you've done along with the other working groups over the last 4 months. We want to pass this on to the finalists along with the scope of work and some background information and the economic analysis that's been done for the site. So this will be one of the keys that they will look at as they develop their plans. I'll just kind of walk through it quickly, give a little background on the point, what it is and what it can be, talk about the point of the Mountain State Land Authority and the guiding principles we've identified, and then describe you and the other working groups. A little bit about who you are, what your tasks are. We mentioned those key vision elements, and identifying additional ideas that are included in more detail in this report. Providing us with ongoing advice during the master planning process. And again, I'll mention that later. Helping us continue to build relationships with potential target companies, investors, and others that have an interest in the site. And then being eyes and ears for the community to communicate to us and communicating to the community what we're doing. So we then summarize the meetings, what we did each month and in between those meetings. Listed the subgroups that we put together. And then kind of the heart of it is the summaries of the work you've done. And part of the challenge here is to take 4 months of discussions and boil it down to a one-page summary. But that's what I've tried to do, for better or worse. So today I'd like to go through those and make sure that we've captured the ideas accurately and haven't mischaracterized anything. I will mention that for those that are interested in diving into more detail, we're including as appendices all of the meeting notes from the meetings, the names and membership of each of the working groups, as well as the reports of the subgroups. And if you get a moment, you may want to kind of look through this and see what other working groups did and what some of their priorities are. I think you'll find that there's an awful lot of overlap and that we're seeing consistency across the board. So I think what I'll do to speed things along, I'll just talk quickly through the summary that I put together for this working group. And then we'll kind of go back paragraph by paragraph, not trying to draft by committee, but just getting your input on whether there are concepts or substance that we need to add, or if I've mischaracterized something that we need to change up. So with your permission, I'll jump in. Started the description of this working group by including the vision that you came up with. And I know there were some little differences here and there in terms of the language, but this is the language that I took directly from the subgroup report and summarizes that vision for the site. A diverse high-density district, culture of innovation, place where you can visit the future, exploratory sandbox, etc. So an innovation center associated closely with industry, includes lab space, research facilities, university presence, anchors, accelerators, etc. And then identified a number of elements that you had outlined to accomplish that vision. And the first was placemaking. We said if we want to attract innovation and the best talent, having a great place is going to be important. So an appealing gathering place, distinct in the area, using the term that you came up with, the smallest big city in America. So looking at corporate offices, the facilities for R&D, implementing cutting edge technologies within the development itself, smart city kinds of things. Looked at infrastructure like autonomous vehicles, blockchain, etc. Shared space, place where people could gather to eat, to enjoy time together, etc. And we talked about university participation, and that could help spur innovation. I think we heard you say that it's more about partnerships and collaboration than it is about building more buildings on the site and a lot of classroom. And then I think you directed that we be kind of neutral regarding which institutions participate, letting their various areas of expertise guide. And continued on in that university participation piece by summarizing the ideas that came out of that subgroup that Donna can head it up. We outlined the idea of an education innovation park. And I'm sure that I inadequately summarized that idea, but tried to in kind of a short paragraph. So it's setting aside some land that would be funded by revenue generated from development or lease or sale of that land. You'd have a representative board of education leaders that would help oversee this, promoting tech transfer from the universities, making it easier for the private sector to plug into the university system and find partners and constructive relationships. And then we've included all of the details in the appendix. The next was this idea of a regulatory sandbox, a place where maybe we could suspend or reduce some regulation to accelerate innovation in the area, chance for some test bedding. And we heard things like working with the FAA on drone testing, some traffic test areas, clinical trials, and various other things.
Hey, Alan. I did have one comment on that particular paragraph, and I sent my suggestions prior to the meeting as well, but I really have a lot of respect for UDOT, and they do some wonderful things for us in the state. I wonder if I'm an outside target company or tenant, if I look at a UDOT test traffic area as a positive or as something that's a complication. I would just suggest, I know we discussed it, I don't disagree with the overall idea, but I don't know if people would always perceive being in a traffic test area as a positive. So just food for thought.
No, I appreciate that. And the same thought came to my mind, and as I'm trying to capture what we said and heard, and this is a chance to refine it. So once I get through all that, we'll go back paragraph by paragraph and try to make sure that it all reflects your views and wishes to the extent that we can reach some consensus here.
Thank you.
That's great input. Thank you.
Thanks.
Then we talked about the groups that we might target, kinds of industry strengths we have here, sectors that this group has some interest in focusing on. And so this bleeds over a little bit into the recruitment group as well, but a number of really wonderful ideas from software, life sciences, clean energy, et cetera. You can read them there, and we'll go back to that in a moment. One item that came up was that to be successful as an innovation area, programming was important. That you don't just build it and they will come, but we have to create activities and opportunities on the site to bring people of different disciplines and backgrounds together to share their ideas and to stimulate creativity. So we talked about the importance of a programming element to this site that can be mentoring, lectures, workshops, pitch contests, hackathons, and more. And a lot of that came out of the subgroup work we did. Also, interestingly, providing opportunities for K through 12 students to participate in the site, kind of through after-school programs, creating both a pipeline for talent, but also, frankly, recruiting executives who are interested in their children having great educational opportunities. And then finally, just kind of a broad piece, the state approach. We heard you say from our first meeting that if we are to accomplish the state's goals, the state needs to maintain some form of control over this development process. It doesn't mean owning it and developing it itself, but may mean joint ventures or development agreements or other methods that allow us to ensure that we accomplish what we hope to. So that's the summary. Let's go through now and again just identify whether there are principles that need to be captured better, eliminated, added to, etc. So here's the opening paragraph. It, as I said, is primarily just copying the vision statement that came out of the subgroup. Anything there that gives you pause? We'll give you a second to read through it and think about it. Okay. If there's nothing there, I'll move on. And certainly, if at any point you want to go back, we can do that. Just as a reminder, I'm going to be sending out the final report tomorrow afternoon as part of the package that we're sending to our planning teams. So we don't have time. Yeah.
This is not a constructive comment, but nevertheless worth making that. As I read the document and just reading it again with you right now, I just want to commend you on really high quality work. I mean, the level of complexity to summarize these discussions and do so in less than a page or so. I think, at least to me, you really captured the essence of much of what we did without getting hung up in the details that are overly specific, while at the same time not being so abstract or generic that the reader can't actually envision what it is that the spirit and intent of what we're doing is meant to be. So I just wanted to commend you on a really, really well done job.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. But I also know there are probably some flaws in it, and so we'll see if we can fix those.
We'll work through them, but it's a great piece of work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Let's go to the placemaking. So this is the kind of community we want to create, a place that would be attractive to talent. You can go ahead and read through that and see if you've got any additional thoughts. Anything there?
Awesome.
Okay. This one's a little more complicated, and I'm trying to capture work of others. So let's focus in on university participation. The first paragraph is kind of general, the importance of a university presence and partnership. Trying to capture that idea that we're not looking to construct a lot of new buildings for educational classrooms, et cetera, but it's more about research and partnerships. And then that second paragraph shouldn't have that bullet point there, but about this idea that our subgroup came up with, developing an education innovation park. So again, the detail will be in the appendix, but that just sort of summarizes, or at least tries to summarize, the concept. So Donna, or members of that subgroup, if I've mischaracterized anything, please let me know.
No, I was reading through and I think it looks good. After the first paragraph, I was a little worried we'd missed something, but the second paragraph takes care of it.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, Alan, on that one? It seems as though that this is clearly focused on the innovation piece, the partnerships between universities and other organizations that are functioning here. Does it occur anywhere else where there's discussion about so the educational piece? Obviously, this is going to be a place where people live, work, play, it sounds like. And so there'll be people, and I think you mentioned it earlier, there'll be individuals here with, perhaps living here with their families and have children who may want to have access to unique opportunities for learning themselves as younger students, and then certainly university students moving in and out of the space over some period of time. Is that part of the thinking here as well, or is that captured someplace else?
It is, and thanks for that question. That's an important one. It's kind of captured in two other places. The stakeholder working group is primarily elected officials from the area. We also have representation from the school districts. And so they've talked about ensuring that we're coordinating with the schools and the school districts to make sure that we've got adequate educational opportunities there. The economic development, recruitment, and investment committee also talked about that, and they talked about having something similar to what you mentioned: on-site after-school activities, bringing in internationally recognized education providers to the site that could help develop a workforce, but also be an inducement to executives who want to have the best education for their children on the site. So it is in some of the other working group reports. We could include something here as well if you'd like.
So, Alan, I think the one thing, if we might want to say higher education participation, just as that board was kind of set aside as an educational board for our technical colleges as well as universities, or at least mention, because there might be some practical things that are happening with industry in our tech colleges. Like I know we toured the Gigafactory, and they have a really great partnership with their technical college there as well as the university. And so,
yeah,
That's a good catch, Dave. That's a good catch.
that is. We'll do that. Yeah, I'll clarify that. Thank you.
I just don't want to leave anybody out, and it really is. If you've got education somewhere else, this would be higher ed.
Right.
Well, and doesn't that conflict with the previous point of not assigning specific land for higher ed? But I'm always a naysayer of higher ed, so I'll shut up after this comment.
No, go ahead and elaborate a little bit.
Well, in the conversations previously, not in the subgroup, because I wasn't a part of that subgroup, so I absolutely don't have the context there. But previously, we had talked about the potential to bring higher ed into the space, and frankly, it feels like it's limited enough land to where it might be tough to fit higher ed facility there, and it conflicts with the first paragraph where more than additional buildings for educational classrooms. So the proposal here is not educational classrooms, right?
Right. The proposal is not a campus. The proposal is a district where companies would come and the assets from the land development would perpetuate research projects and partnership agreements with universities and industry. And so it's creating a funding opportunity and an innovation opportunity that allows companies to come and be in this district if they have a partnership with an institution in the state or with this board of multiple institutions in the state.
Donna, just adding to what you were just saying, I think it's also worth noting that in a lot of those research environments, even university, industry, research projects, those do create educational opportunities, typically for graduate students. So we can use the term education, and different folks will take on different thoughts about what the scope of that education is. So to the extent it's helpful to add a qualifier in there, I think that's fine, to Diogo's point, but clearly those are educational opportunities that are sort of part and parcel.
But it is not a campus.
Okay.
And I just add that you don't have to have a physical building to provide an opportunity for education. And I think moving people in and out from across the state from educational institutions provide an opportunity to create a hub of knowledge and skill and experience that could be accessed for short periods of time, or even through technologies, and then taken back to campuses and other places for dissemination, and engaging more people in this process of innovation from across the state. Don't necessarily have to have a building to do that. So,
yeah, and as I'm even thinking about it, if it's helpful, those educational opportunities lead to workforce development opportunities. Those are folks involved in those research programs and those partnerships that are typically highly sought after for employment by these companies. So I think there's lots of ways to characterize this.
And one other word you could use is commercialization. A large part of this is innovation, and I think we're talking about innovation with a purpose, not just innovation in a vacuum. So we want to get the innovation in the hands of people and make their lives better. So you can talk about, I agree on the, rather than just saying university, you can say higher ed or some broader term that incorporates other institutions in education. And then it's a connection between those groups and the commercial sector and individuals. And one purpose of that is to lead to commercialization of the innovation, so people actually benefit from it.
Yeah, good points. Well, I can work some of these concepts in there and try to clarify it a little bit. That's helpful.
Alan, the only other thing that, and maybe we don't need to spell it out in here, but I know we had talked about it quite a bit, is not to duplicate things that are already happening at other institutions across the state. So if there's something going on at the U, we shouldn't try to be duplicating it here when it's 20 miles down the road, or UVU or wherever across the state where we don't have duplication.
Right. Yep. Good point. Okay. And this is an attempt to sort of capture ideas that can be tossed around. We're probably, as part of the initial framework master plan, this is a little too detailed or specific for that, but I think we ought to be tossing these ideas around, letting them marinate a little bit so that we can decide over time what gets our limited attention. Good. Really good feedback. I'll massage that a little bit. Anything else on university participation? Okay. Regulatory sandbox. We got the point that UDOT traffic test areas doesn't really stir the blood and isn't going to be attracting a lot of innovation probably. So,
well, I think transportation, I wanted to make a point on that. Sorry. I think transportation innovation is different than traffic test area.
Yep.
Because they are doing a lot of smart city innovations.
That's a good point.
Yep.
one point on clinical trials, regulatory sandbox sort of gives the impression that we might be sort of trying to create a zone where regulatory barriers are suspended. I think putting clinical trials in that realm could be perceived as us seeking to bypass regulatory process. And by the time you're in a clinical trial, FDA regs are sort of in full force and effect. So
That's true. Good point.
Yeah, it's a real good point.
I would include here everything that is state regulated, because it's a lot easier to, go through those.
Yeah, that's an important point. We can't control what happens at the federal level always. Can influence it maybe, but we can control the state level to some degree. Good thoughts. Okay.
This is Steve. Can I ask a question of the group? Smart city was brought up a moment ago, and I haven't been in all your meetings. Is there a desire to dig deep into sort of smart city technology? Is that one of the ideas?
It's one that came up, certainly. I'm not sure that we really delved into what that means and to what extent would do that. But I think there's an interest in looking at how we might incorporate technologies within the site that help solve problems, create efficiencies.
Well, how smart city technologies are I think most commonly expressed in a project is through very intense monitoring of movements of traffic and sort of energy systems, and so that there's sort of a central sort of platform where the functionality and the characteristics of the project or the city are being monitored, and then in real time or downstream modifications made in certain systems to improve the functionality of the city or the district. It's quite expensive and it's very sophisticated. It's actually being pursued much more in Asia than it is in the United States, right now. Although Google Sidewalk has gotten quite a bit of notoriety lately for developing some technologies that that are pursuing this. The reason I'm asking is because in our work on our scope that we're developing, we don't spend a lot of time on that topic, and I'm just wondering if we should spend a little bit more on it in our scope, scoping with the consultants.
Alan, let me pick up on this, Steve, and let me kind of tie a knot here. I'm the one maybe that's planted this seed with Alan from an experience that I'll describe to you that I had a year or so ago. I was on a national legislative task force that looked at smart cities and developed a kind of a framework and a roadmap. And we went back to Columbus, Ohio, that had gotten a $40 million, I think it was a department, the U.S. Department of Transportation grant to roll out a smart city concept. And so some of the things you're talking about is exactly what they are doing. And, so that's kind of where the kind of the seed has come from. But I would like to see us investigate and explore that some more to put a framework around that. I think there's something that we could learn from Columbus, that there might be some best practices, some ideas that we might be thinking about as we roll out the point. So that's where that kind of came from, Steve.
Thank you.
It's one of those where it's really intriguing. There's some fascinating things going on in this sector. There's also growing pushback in the sector as people worry about loss of privacy with cameras and sensors and monitors around. And that kind of killed the Sidewalk Labs project up in the Toronto waterfront last year. It became a very controversial issue. So I think there's some things here that are certainly worth looking at. We ought to be exploring the technologies, ways that we can save money, make communities safer. But we need to pursue it pretty deliberately, I think. Okay. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Representative Handy. It's been really helpful to have the materials that you've shared. I'll move on. Target sectors and companies. You made the point that the market will largely determine what sectors will fit best, but indicated a number of industry sectors that might be of interest to us that are aligned with our strengths as a community and that could perhaps be complementary of some of what we've got going on currently at Silicon Slopes and at the universities and in our biotech community, et cetera. So that was an attempt in this paragraph to capture some of that. Anything you see there that raises your eyebrows a little bit?
Alan, I just had one nit, which is that we say digital health twice. One's standalone and one's in the parenthetical. So we might be able to either consolidate that or...
Thank you.
Sure. Really high value add comment there.
Well, it's important.
I'll add one more since I'm at it. I didn't quite recall the discussion of a clinical research hospital and wondered if someone could provide just a little bit of context for that. That's a big lift. Maybe challenging to execute if it's not core to the vision of the point.
I could probably comment on some of that.
Please.
We had talked about the fact that there would need to be some healthcare facilities at the site.
Yeah.
To maybe corroborate that with the potential of making a boutique type of operation that would facilitate clinical trial type work that would need to be done. So it was not necessarily to build a clinical trial hospital as much as it was to co-opt perhaps the need for a healthcare facility of some kind on site, and then to skew that towards a character of doing clinical trials or facilitating clinical trials. Those are always challenging to do, and David Beers is on the here. You could probably do that a little bit better than I can without the need to have that. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, so we've been thinking quite a bit about, you know, what could we put here that would be not just a hospital, but something that would have a focus that could support other entities that would be at the site as well. And so if we're going to have biotech and med tech companies at the site, you know, one of the great challenges in smaller companies, especially conducting clinical research, is really accruing patients. And I think, as everybody knows, the clinical research has become a really interesting area that, you know, the universities used to that was where you went to do clinical research, and university hospitals have become, you know, a source of generating profit for the university, or at least revenue for the universities. And you know, there is a struggle going on right now in terms of really being able to find patients to accrue on clinical trials, and having a setting where and you know, we can be, you know, the idea is to be creative about what this would look like, but you know, something that's different than just a hospital, you know, just a community hospital, but something that where maybe the University of Utah has one floor of that, and the University of Utah Hospital has one floor, and Intermountain has a floor, and and they use it for a center where they could have teaching going on with residents and medical students being there, but also, you know, the focus really being on clinical research and you know, having, you know, our idea would be to think about having a clinical research organization on site. We've been talking with some groups trying to get them attracted to come to Utah on the preclinical research side of things as well. So really having kind of a whole, you know, from beginning to end on the you know, from early idea discovery stage all the way through clinical research at one place. And you know, that's just kind of the concept that we're thinking about right now.
That's good clarification, and I can certainly clarify that in the document, that we're not looking necessarily at a clinical research hospital, but at incorporating some clinical research into the healthcare facilities in the area, and looking at how that might tie in with some of the economic development opportunities there. So very, very good input. Okay, anything else in that one? This is really helpful.
I was just looking at the GOED industry clusters that they've identified that we're using for strategic workforce investment grant this year. And one of them is financial services. And I'm just wondering if that might be something that would fit in here nicely, particularly on the technology side. I haven't been involved in previous meetings, so maybe you already discussed that, but.
No, I think that's a good one. And in fact, that's one that was raised in our Economic Development, Recruitment, and Innovation, or Investment Committee. It's listed there, but I think certainly we ought to include that. Yeah,
it seems like it would make sense to align with some of the GOED expectations, I think, for the industry clusters.
I agree. Yeah, and in fact, in that other group, we had GOED and EDCU come in and talk about the clusters, how they were developed, where we came from, and so they're recommending that we build off of those. So that's certainly there, and I think this would strengthen that tie.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, the last couple, programming. As I said, it's kind of a little nebulous at this point, but as we move ahead, we'll probably want to have, or may want to have, a group that would come in and actually manage programming in the site. It could be anything from entertainment to educational programs to, you know, lectures, people sharing the work that they're doing at a lunch gathering somewhere. But we found, as we've researched successful innovation hubs around the country and around the world, that deliberate programming is a key to that success. Anything there that we're missing?
Do you have any cultural programming in there? Is that something you would want to consider?
Certainly.
I'm just reading it quickly. I don't see anything alluding to that, but I wasn't sure if that was the vision for, you know, just to focus on innovation and education and technology, or if we're looking at putting some kind of cultural aspect in there as well to support all of that.
Yeah, it's not something that came up much in this group, but it's certainly important, and something that you know, is an element of many of these innovation sites. Part of it could even fit up here into placemaking. You know, if we're trying to create a place that has culture in it, entertainment opportunities.
Yeah.
Music, etc.
Yeah, you have the fine dining and such there as well.
Yeah.
You know, this is across the street from where I live, so I have a vested interest as well as a professional one.
That's fair.
Alan, I think it's a really good comment, and I mentioned something later on, thinking a little bit about diversity and inclusion that might tie into that as well. Just, I do think placemaking is a good spot for it too. Kind of looking at this as a way to enhance and deepen our culture and inclusivity is a good idea.
I like that.
Alan, this is really minor, but using the after school program phrase kind of implies something that would center only on local students, but isn't the point going to be a destination as well for people to enjoy the programming and the opportunities there? So I might broaden that out, the K through 12 wording.
Well, you could do
I mean, you might even just replace it. I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I was just going to say you could do youth summer camps and those kinds of things as well, right? Which would expand that more than just after school.
Yeah, I think I would just make it broader, just through engaging programs or through hands-on programs or something that just gives it a more of a broader feel.
Yeah, and that's actually what I intended. I didn't look at it as just a program for people that live there or go to school there, but that you'd have programs that anyone in the region could come and participate in. And so I need to clarify that.
Alan, on this section as well, and thinking back to the conversation we were just having about universities, a lot of these types of programs are done on several of our campuses. I know we do at the U. And some of these are also programs that other not-for-profit or other organizations are delivering, and they integrate into, speaking from a university perspective, they integrate into some of what we were just talking about on the university piece. And I'm just wondering, I think the language is fine as it is in terms of saying we think this type of programming should be there, but I guess more in the form of a question I would ask, how relevant is it to tie it back to the other pieces relative to a standalone statement?
That's a good point. I'm open to thoughts. I'll make that note.
I mean, I can tell you from an economic development standpoint, from a commercialization standpoint, some of the comments that we were just having, we view much of the programming as highly integrated. Some of the types of programming that are here that are for the community, probably less so. But for example, opportunities for mentoring and assisting early stage companies, we have pretty mature programming around that, and there are some other aspects. So I think in some respects, when you talk about some of the university involvement and some of those programs interfacing with industry, which will lead to supporting startups, sort of hard to disentangle them.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and it goes back to the comment earlier about we don't want to duplicate what's already being done on campuses, but is there a way to collaborate on that, maybe, is a question.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. Yeah, it's interesting. We've tossed out a number of ideas through this process, and I think, as we all expected, would be trying to capture those ideas up front, but recognize that the discussion doesn't end. There's so much richness to the ideas that need to be kind of sorted out and built on. And I think one of the challenges for us is to think about what the real priorities are. Can't be all things to all people, can't accomplish every idea that's been presented. But we wanted to capture those ideas and then start the process of prioritizing, determine what we can fund, what fits, how we can find some synergies. And I think we'll continue to have rich discussions over the coming months.
I have a question. Maybe this was discussed in previous meetings and decision not to do it, but was there any conversation about having a sort of makerspace that would attract, support both for those who are living there, community members, and some of the K-12 students and so forth that you're talking about? Is that something that, or is it sort of part of the and more piece of that sentence?
I think we can call that out. We did have some conversations about that.
Yeah, we talked about that relative to the K through 12 zone in particular, trying to draw students in, align them with college level and beyond, as well as some of the industry and startup focus to provide early exposure. We could be more explicit.
But I thought the intent was that industry would lead those and manufacture those or build those out and then enable those to be used by education or others.
I think that's right, Brenner. I remember that.
Agreed with Brenner there.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification in addition.
Hey, Alan, can I ask a question on the state approach section whenever you're ready for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we put a little bit finer point on what we mean by the state main control of the project long term, or perhaps add a little more example, or at least the intent behind it? So I think one area we talked about was a land trust, a public land trust, or some sort of a structure or vehicle that would, one, prohibit near-term kind of self-interest or short-term interest at the expense of long-term public interest. Two, and that's really more developer-focused. Two, that would provide long-term sustainable funding for much of what ultimately becomes or is manifest in this language as a public utility, as opposed to private interest alone. And so some sort of a sustainable financing model that not only allows the state to maintain control over the project long term, but kind of hopefully ideally prohibits the state from subjecting the point to political machinations and changing administrations, and also provides that ongoing financial sustainability. And I think the example we used a couple of conversations ago is what Stanford has done in that regard with its land trust, entering into very long-term leases.
Right, and we have our consultants looking at some of those issues right now, trying to see what would be most sustainable from a financial standpoint, what's consistent with legislative directive, et cetera. I think we certainly can capture those ideas, and I remember we did probably in the first meeting talk about creating a land trust.
That's right. Yeah, so if we could clarify the intent a little, so it's not to prescribe the solution, but at least to guide the exploration, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, good, really good. Anything else before we wrap this up?
I have a question, Alan, on that state approach. The sentence says that to ensure the state achieves its broad goals, is there something that specifies what the other outcomes, for example, that we're supposed to be aligning with? Does that exist, or?
It's in the statute that creates the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, and those objectives all came out of the public process that was done in 2017 and 2018. So I actually think it's a really good example of where over 4,000 people participated in workshops and evaluated scenarios and shared their ideas, and the top 12 keys that came out of that were all incorporated directly into the statute. So yeah, that's kind of.
All right, thanks.
I can clarify that probably. Anything else?
Alan, I just wanted to apologize for being so late. I'm on set out in Go.
Brenner, you look great.
I know. Wish I looked like that. Let me just kind of wrap up, because I know several people have to run off right now, and then if we want to continue the discussion, we can. But let me just talk about next steps. So we are not going to have any more meetings of this working group this calendar year. We're not going to bring you back the last week of November and December. Instead, we'll focus on getting that planning team in place, getting them the information you've developed. And then next spring, as they work on that framework master plan, there'll be essentially 4 phases of that. One will be information gathering, idea generation. 2 will be developing a series of scenarios, different ways this site could develop consistent with the ideas that you've presented. Then we'll be refining those scenarios based on some analysis. We'll run it through some models. It'll show things like how much will it cost? What will it do to traffic? What will it mean for job creation? What will it mean for sustainability measures and other things? And that'll help us with public input get down to a preferred scenario that we'll refine and then turn into a framework master plan. As part of each of those phases, we intend to involve any willing and interested members of the working groups to come in, meet with the planners, provide input, share what you like, what you don't like, etc. So we don't have specifically planned meetings yet, but as we start working with the planning teams, we'll be notifying you of opportunities to come in and provide some input directly with those teams. So that's kind of the road from here to there. And again, I'm happy to continue the conversation here, but for those of you that have to go, let me just say how deeply I appreciate your work on this. It's not a small thing, and I know how busy you are, and your participation shows concern for our community and its future. And your ideas have been fantastic, and I just can't thank you enough. I think this group in particular has been really engaged and creative in the ideas you've shared. So I'll do my best to try to capture the discussion today in some edits to this document, and we'll get it ready to send out to the planning teams tomorrow. So thank you. And I guess I'd turn it over to the chairs, and again, willing to continue the conversation with anyone that wants.
Yeah, I think you've captured it. I have nothing to add. I can hang on for a while as well if some of you would like to continue to discuss, but I think we've captured it, Alan. Commissioner Wilson, what do you think?
I just want to thank Alan. This is great work that he's put together, made our job easy by trying to capture everybody's thoughts and put it into a document, which is not easy. So thank you, Alan, and thanks to everybody else for all your input.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna sign off. I'll see you.
Yeah, let's go ahead and adjourn then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alan.